Iida Shihoko, who is also from Japan, although not originally from Tokyo.
Yes, I'm originally from Tokyo.
You are?
I have recently become a Nagoya citizen eventually, but I'm coming from Tokyo.
I see.
Yes.
I should explain, or do you want to explain? Okay, I'll explain. Iida-san is one of the curators for next year's Aichi Triennale, which will be the second Aichi Triennale. Right? The first Triennale was in 2010. One of my first questions, I think, will be, why was there a Triennale? What is the Triennale in Aichi to do? Do you know much about why the Triennale was created in 2010?
Yes, it has a particular idea behind, because it's a kind of souvenir from the previous governor of Aichi Prefecture, because Aichi had an World Expo in 2005, and the governor wanted to continue the cultural projects, because it's slightly difficult to characterize what kind of region of Aichi is. There are quite strong industry represented by such as Toyota. So it also has a history or tradition to making something, industrial. But it has not been so much exposed or represented by culture. Then the former governor wanted to continue international cultural projects through art. Then it has begun.
So it's an identity project for the city, but also an international kind of platform, or
yes, because it's international triennial. Although it's organized by local prefecture government, so which is very local commitment is required, because it's at the very end of the day, it's a festival for local communities. But it's also important for share what we have in Aichi for local audience as well as international audience. So that it really makes sense to make festival in international context.
Right. And do you know if they had a model somewhere else? I know that in Japan, in recent years, there's a kind of boom of biennales and triennales. Are they did Aichi look to other triennales or biennales in Japan, or were they looking overseas, or where does the model sort of come from?
Well, I think Aichi doesn't have any particular example, but still, as you have a talk with previous speakers, there are actually too many museums or galleries around. If you count, it's nearly 100. Most of them had been built in early 80s, before bubble economy collapsed in 1992 or 3. So as if it's replacement of making box without human resources. So biennales or triennials has become more in a sense trend. Yeah. So I think that the Aichi prefecture government wanted to follow that kind of international trend. But on the other hand, there is a certain not example, but perhaps great model in Japan would be, well, perhaps Yokohama, because both triennial have recurrent exhibition every 3 years, and then both triennials are held in city environment. Very different from, let's say, Echigo Tsumari or Setouchi Inland Sea Festival.
What about Fukuoka?
Yeah, Fukuoka is also different case, because it's initiated and organized by museum. So it's very strongly connected not only with the local communities, but also with the activity as a museum, institution with building collection. So in case of Fukuoka, which is much similar to the case of Queensland Art Gallery perhaps, using
I'll get to that in a second.
Triennial. Yes, using triennial in order to develop or strengthen the making collection. So that is one of the strategies. But in case of Aichi, because of the environment, very developed city, stable city, then I would say Yokohama triennial would be a good example or model for us to think about how it makes possible to engage with the idea of community. Organizing and having triennials in that kind of context or environment, which has been already filled with so many other things to do.
Right.
So I think it's very important for international festival or events, cultural events, to think about, like eventually attended a talk by Paul Chan this morning, as he exactly said, for whom, who is doing for whom?
Yeah.
Yes.
Who's it for?
Yeah, who is for? Yes. So we always have to be aware of for whom we are doing this.
Right.
So I think it can be applied to the case of a triennial as well. So it's very difficult to, or it's very easy to lost idea of audience in case of international big events such as triennial.
One of the sort of criticisms in some ways, I think, that has been directed at some international events in places like Japan, is that they're international, but it's really about bringing overseas to a local audience. How would you respond to that? Like, is there a problem with the idea of international itself in some situations?
No, I don't find it's a problematic thing, because it's also important for local artists or local communities to rethink about what we have originally in that particular region by interact with.
So, like local identity.
Yes, discovering local identity, in particular the context of Aichi, because, as I said previously, it's a very difficult place or region to characterize what we have, what kind of characteristic cultural heritage we originally have. We're supposed to have something, but even local art professionals have not been able to articulate what we have. So it's very important to be exposed the potential of that area or regions with more international stage.
Right. I think that's a big conversation. The pressure of having to form a local identity, and whether that whole system needs to be reconsidered in situations like Japan. But before that, you mentioned Queensland. You were talking about the Asia Pacific Triennale, I think, but I know that you have spent time in Queensland at the art gallery. Could you tell me a little bit about your experience? Was it two years?
Yes, I was there 2 years, working as one of the curatorial staff under the title Visiting a Curator. So usually visiting curator is a kind of person, scholars or academics, who had a particular purpose of researching something, but spending only a week or 2 weeks or less than 1 month, and then giving a lecture a couple of capital cities, and then go back to their home country. That's
right.
it. But in case of me, I was very fortunate enough to be hosted by the gallery to research the APT, the Asia Pacific Triennial of Contemporary Art, taking 2 years. Because I had a particular idea, I wanted to know what kind of context the gallery has been able to build for the local community, because Brisbane, Queensland, it's also, very local region, different from Sydney, different from Melbourne. So I wonder how they have been able to put the premises of contemporary art in the first place to organize such a cultural event.
Right.
Because in case of Japan, it has been very difficult to engage with contemporary art, even museum of contemporary art itself.
I see. So do you think that was successful? Was there something successful in the Queensland experience that you could identify or take back from your time in Queensland to use, for example, in Aichi?
Yes, it's in interesting way, because what I researched in Queensland was almost opposite way that I'm doing for Aichi now. Because in case of Queensland, which is similar to, let's say, Fukuoka, because it was organized by an institution, and then it has been made a massive collection of contemporary art. So which means it has made discourses through contemporary art. But on the other hand, in case of Aichi, it's initiated by local government, and then they don't have any collection or doesn't aim for building collection.
So there's nothing left. There's nothing left over as objects.
But
or
we also have a mission to making history for local community. So it's almost, as if I'm practicing my curatorial practices almost from the opposite end. So in a sense, it's kind of continuity of what I have researched and what I have learned from experience of Queensland, but conducting what I can do as a curator from opposite way. So it might be related each other in some ways.
Okay. Can I ask you a broader question, I guess? I know you've been to Queensland. I know after that you were also at a museum in Korea.
Yes.
As a Japanese curator, that's not so common, is it?
Perhaps.
Would you describe yourself as a common type? And if not, why? Why were you looking for these other experiences?
Perhaps I could identify myself as a not so common curator in the context of Japanese art scene, because usually you can belong to an institution or you can be independent curator, but in order to survive as an independent is very tough, similar to other regions. So I started my career as a curator in institution, but which was private museum. So different politics was behind.
Was that Opera City?
Yes.
Or?
Yes. Then I actually hadn't had a chance to engage with international discourse or context because I just jumping into the actual, curatorial activity. I mean, making exhibition immediately after my graduation of university. So it was a very good experience for me. But on the other hand,
what did you study?
Art and science, 芸術学. Yes,
Okay.
it is called art and science, but it's kind of curating or a critic. So anyway, then I thought at a certain point, I knew that I would face with a kind of wall, and then have to strengthen my curatorial methodology at a certain point. I knew it. Then I always wanted to broaden my experience in different contexts or regions or cities, and exporting myself very different dynamics context. Then I decided to leave Tokyo at that time, because at that time, I'm not sure what's going on now, but you have very little chances to engage with contemporary art, very different ways. So either you can choose belonging to an institution or being independent. But I wanted to explore other possibilities, because artists have many ways to engage with contemporary art, so that's performers or critics or writers or almost every cultural practitioners try to explore different ways of engaging with contemporary society in a way through culture. So I think the curator also should try to explore different possibilities. You don't have to follow the certain rule which was built by the requirement of the society or politics, if I say. Then I just wanted to try what I could do, and then once you left the institution, you have to survive in other ways. And then it's same with living as an artist. You have to apply to get some funds in order to realize your project. So I just making application in order to secure my life as I have to live. And then it was Brisbane, Australia, who could support me, and then also supported by Japanese government as well.
Right,
and
grant.
also after that, I had supported by Korean.
Right.
Yeah, it's Korean government. It's a fund from the Korean government. So I had spent my past 2 or 3 years only relying onto, money from the outside of the country. So I really have to thank for it.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to conducting a different way of curation, not relying onto existing system in a way.
Right. And so you're bringing that experience to a situation like Aichi. Was that something that you had in mind, that you came back and you thought, I don't want to work in an institution, but maybe a triennale, or was that not really like that?
I haven't decided, or I have never declared that I will never work inside an institution, because I always wanted to be back in museum, because I see there are still possibilities. It's not great situation, to be honest, but still.
I mean, to be honest, you've got too many museums, people say, and yet so many biennales and triennales starting at the same time. So it almost seems like you're abandoning, the museums are being abandoned rather than transformed. It could seem that way, but you're saying no, that's not the case. You want to change the museum.
I'm not a kind of person that have a strong, ambition. But as you said, I'm not saying goodbye to museums. I'm always welcome to be back there. But still, on the other hand, it's true partly because I see there are productivity or potential of triennials or biennales in the context of Japanese contemporary arts industry now, which allows me to engage with contemporary art at the very end of the day. Because, as I said, it's difficult to realize contemporary art exhibition in Japanese art museum. Although there are several museums or curators who have continued with taking ceaseless efforts. So I won't say there is nothing, but still I found it could be more, challenging possibility would be there by engaging with triennial. Because it can provide audiences with broader possibilities engage with contemporary art, because it's not necessary to define, okay, this is contemporary art, you see it, on the street or in the public sphere. If you have to buy the ticket to enter the museum, you have to decide if you want to see it or not. But if you are exposed by art on the street or somewhere under the name of festival, you'll naturally be exposed by contemporary art without knowing this is art or not. So it's audience who can define if it can be called as art or not.
Right, and that's obviously what you're thinking about for Aichi.
Yes.
I see. I've read through some of the notes about your plans, you and your co-curators planning. I see, like you mentioned, festival. There's performances, opera. All sorts of things which people might not consider to be a typical contemporary art sort of thing. I'm interested in how that relates to the first Aichi Triennale. So 2010, is there a big difference between what you have planned, you and your co-curators, for next year compared to 2010?
Yes, there is one local curator who has launched the triennial itself. He has continued as one of our main co-curators in the second edition. And the biggest, and although there are a couple of changes in terms of curatorial team, staffs, but we also would like to continue to giving audience with enjoyment, interact with art, which is the best thing to do. But the biggest difference was the situation with Japan after March 11 and Tohoku great earthquake, tsunami, and the radiation issues.
I was going to ask.
Yes.
2010 and 2013 are going to be very, very different moments, I think,
also,
for Japan.
we have a different artistic director or different curatorial team, including myself. Also, context and situation have been totally changed since last year. So the first edition, it's their mission to launch the triennial with successful model.
Right.
Raising idea of we are going to start. It has to be enjoyable experience for local audience. But after the second edition or third edition, the future editions, it has to be more strengthened or emphasized on what we'd like to articulate or what we want to talk through art. Then, in our case, at the second edition, it's going to be the first international triennial held in Japan after March 11. So I think it's quite important for us to talk about the situation not only in Japan but also international sense of urgency or crisis through the platform which is called triennial. So because we are not going to make an exhibition of earthquake, but considering what have happened since last year, Libya's Cairo democracy, or the bankrupt of Greece or Spain, lots of things have happened. So I think it's we also want to know what's going on around the world aside from what have happened in Japan, and it's really important to discuss through artworks or through triennial. So curators or audiences, we can also join in the same dialogue or discussion in order to rethink about what we have learned from the history or we have missed to learn. That's why the history repeats.
We talked a little bit about that with some of the like participants in our Guerrilla Talks yesterday, actually, about this need to rethink history.
Yes.
I definitely see that in a lot of practices now. I'm wondering, though, with the Triennale, for example, model, it's always sort of functioning on an international level, generally. And is there any kind of problem there? You've mentioned local identity and the fact that the audience will be very local. Even within Japan, I guess Aichi as a region was not very affected by the
it's not Tokyo,
local
it's not
sort of
Kyoto,
problem, you know?
it's not even Hiroshima. So I think actually it's a very important and interesting question.
So what will that
for me.
experience be, I guess?
Yeah, because we have shared the same issues, how can we be local and global at the same time? It's a common issue for every single biennales or triennials today. But in case of Aichi, what we are facing as a curator is perhaps how we can make an exhibition which touch on the global issues or a sense of urgency or crisis in a region or in a cities that have not been affected by the actual crisis at all, because it's very stable city supported by Toyota car companies, and which has not been suffered seriously by aging depopulation.
Yeah.
Although partly,
and
yes,
there's a big museum, a big Toyota museum.
So it's very, in a sense, stable, wealthy region. And then, what's the point of talking about sense of crisis or urgency in the city that has not know anything about crisis? But this is very important for us because other cities or other regions might have been falling into the same situation because we have been always exposed by a lot of road crisis every day through media on the stream.
So it's a kind of crisis observation situation.
Not observation because we are in the situation.
We're
are
still
not
participants, but not
so
directly.
That's why the theme of a triennial is awakening. By what we have been awakened. We are only watching.
Could you tell us the full title? I know it's Awakening, Where We Are Standing.
Yes, where are we standing?
Where are we standing?
Yes, the Earth, memory, and resurrection. So it's a questioning about modernity, perhaps, or what have been regarded as valuable, or it's all about questioning the situation, not thinking about future. No, we are thinking about future, but it's too recent considering what happened in Japan last year. Although we want to think about future because this is something art can do in later period, but it's still too recent. Then first thing we could do or we should do is to look at where are we standing on this ground, and then what consists of this ground. So yes, that's why even living in Aichi or Nagoya region, you can just keep going your daily life without noticing what's going outside of your world, your personal world. But there are many issues around you all the time. So that's why it could be linked to or share with other cities with seemingly stable, but we can also question: is your city really stable or not? So that's why it's important title, Awakening. It could be awakened by something which we have not been noted. Yes.
Thanks. I'm going to ask a more how can I say a practical question.
Yes.
The effects have also been economic. I'm wondering, has this affected the way that the Triennale will be funded? I know that some events that are linked to government funds, both in Japan and also overseas, immediately cultural sort of institutions, events are the first things to be cut. Yes. When we say that we need to save money, we'll take money from arts funding. Is this affecting the Aichi Triennale? Have you had to think about how you'll support the Triennale?
In longer perspective, yes, because governments cannot be wealthy forever, and it's already decided from the first edition. The budgets for the triennial will be, reduced.
It's going to
decline
decrease
each year. Yeah, it's obvious, but I think still. Comparing to other situation, at least in case of Japanese museums, I think it's still not so bad. So I think it's a matter of how we want to allocate the limited amount of money, in which way, for what. So I don't think it's very, very small amount of money. But of course, governmental ends always think that we don't have enough money. But we can be creative or innovative enough to think about how we can use this limited amount of money. That's why we are working with artists. They are such innovative people, and also architects. Because for the next one, we will invite quite a few numbers of architects because of artist director, who is architecture historian and critic. So that is another thing that we might want to emphasize more on the second edition.
What will their role be? I was going to ask you actually what kind of work you were interested in, what kind of artists you would be inviting. You mentioned architects.
Yes.
How will architects be part of something like a Triennale, which you've also said will be a festival?
Yes. Of course, they are not making a building. We don't have such a big amount of money. But, architects, they could also observe or rethink about the existing land, ground, or existing building or region itself. They have a great, insight. They can bring great insight into where are we standing, literally. Because they can see existing building or houses. At the same time, former houses or buildings that has been already gone to somewhere. So it's again the rediscovering of the history, what kind of region we have lived. So then architects could collaborate with artists to reinterpret the existing environments or regions by not making a building, but reinterpret more conceptually. Or we could also invite artists, visual artists who could make artwork which have a architectural structure, for example, or even performing artists could perform on the stage, which designed by architects, for example. So there are many possible ways to interact or invite multidisciplinary kind of artists. So it's system, our end, who always wanted to categorize, you are a visual artist, you are a performing artist. It's just boring.
Right. Is there a danger that then art is just a form of entertainment, that, or is that a good thing, perhaps?
Yeah, we are always facing with that, very, delicate issues. But as long as we have a certain clear idea or vision or, clear theme that we want to articulate, I don't think that it would fall into purely entertainment to be consumed. Entertainment itself is not so bad idea for audience. They can have fun through art.
No, audiences should never have fun.
Are you saying seriously?
No. No, I think the problem of the question of sense of humor and fun and so on is definitely one that a lot of contemporary artists and institutions probably need to reconsider.
Yeah, it cannot be separated because both entertainment or serious art discourse cannot be separated because it's linked to each other. And if we can't, curators cannot provide theory or discourse behind. It could be fell into pure entertainment to be consumed. But if we could provide idea behind why this artist is making this kind of work and why this performers doing that kind of practices, with not written text necessarily, but having conversation or dialogue or just walkthrough or just sharing time with the audience, then it can be theorized later. Although it might take some time, but as long as art practices or artwork are received by the audience as an entertainment, it's fine. But if it's consumed, I think it's problem. So it's we have to make a differentiation between what is consumed, what is to consume, what is enjoy. It's very different idea.
Right. That's a big conversation. Just lastly, because we are in the art fair, and I think a lot of people are coming to the art fair to see art, not necessarily to buy it. I shouldn't say that too loud. Do you think that these sorts of platforms, such as art fairs and triennales, are they the new institutions? Are they going to become our new institutions?
Interesting question. I think yes and no, because it's already an institution, because it's being supported by a certain system. But different from museums, for instance, it has been institutionalized in different ways, and it's more vivid theme because it's directly linking to money, economics. Although museums also, strongly related to money issues, but still in very different ways. In case of art fair, it can be changed each year. The change can be much, much quicker than the sort of art institutions can take. So I think that kind of speed or, quickness, how do you say?
Yep,
the sense of time,
rapidity.
Can work well in case of art fair.
Right. Do we need to change so quickly?
No, I don't think so, but not necessary. But the art fair cannot be separated by the change of economy. So that's why it cannot be helped to change if you seriously like to reflect on what's going on around the world. And then I think the format or institution as an art fair as an institution cannot be be involved in the whole politics of economics much, honestly than the art institutions represented by museum.
Right. So the economics it's out there.
Yes,
everybody knows what it's about.
I think which is good to be reminded, because we can't be that naive that engaging with non-profit art, for example, is a good thing. No, non-profit activity or non-profit organization also needs money to support or sustain or maintain their activities. So it cannot be separated all the time, but we tend to be easily forgotten. And
We
then
forget
art
that.
fair or galleries or dealers, they are so sensible people that we are all in the same platform. We can't be escaped from it anyways.
Yeah, we're all subject to the bottom line.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, I think we'll leave it there.
Thank you.
But thank you. This is Iida Shihoko, who's a curator for the next Aichi Triennale.
Thank you very
Thank
much
you.
for joining me.